This is not practical. This is not practical. I'm an idiot. I'm back. This is the fifth year I am choosing movies at random and reviewing them. I'm doing 31 movies for each day of October. So 31 minutes of 31 Halloween slash horror movies that I'm going to be doing this year. Let's go. Alright. The Autopsy of Jane Doe. Autopsy of Jane Doe, released in 2016 and is directed by Andre Overdahl. It stars Emile Hirsch and Brian Cox as a father and son who run a mortuary. So when they receive a mysterious female corpse, a Jane Doe, weird stuff starts to happen. There's a phenomenal stretch of this movie where it's just these two characters tearing the body apart in graphic detail that makes you wince. It's creepy when they continuously tear the body apart and they're trying to figure out what happened to this body and they can't figure it out. They just keep snapping bones and removing stuff. They're like, no, she didn't die of this, she didn't die of that. The more they find out about what happened to this person, weird stuff starts to happen, which I kind of feel when the movie starts to fall short. I feel like the rest of the movie, while it's not bad per se, I just don't think it's not as strong as the setup of this movie. Overall, I enjoyed Autopsy of Jane Doe. It's a small-scale horror movie set in a mortuary, but it's two great actors and the atmosphere of the movie makes it worth a watch, so this gets 7 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10. Gretel and Hansel. Gretel and Hansel were released in 2020 and is directed by Osgood Perkins. This is a dark take on Hansel and Gretel, where Gretel just has witch powers all of a sudden. So yeah, you know the story. Two kids get lost in the woods and find a house full of food. Old lady seems welcoming, but she's a cannibalistic witch. I think my favorite thing about this film was its amazing old-time fall atmosphere. I would highly recommend watching this during the spooky season. This film really captures the feeling of an old-time, mature fairy tale. I like the main actress Sophia Lillis, aka Bev from It, as well as the main actress as a witch Hulda, who is delightfully evil as the cannibalistic witch. This movie was fun and comfortable to watch. We get witches, we get naive children, and a brisk autumn fairy tale atmosphere, so this gets 7 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10. The Strangers. The Strangers released in 2008 and is directed by Brian Bertino. In the current age of Airbnbs and people renting houses in the middle of the woods, I feel like this movie is even more effective today than it was in 2008. Like, just imagine, you're in an unfamiliar place, in an unfamiliar house, and your door gets knocked on in the middle of the night, and you don't know who's doing it. That's just terrifying to think about. That scene where they first knock on the door and the torchlight doesn't work, so we don't really see this lady's face, is so good at giving you that uneasy feeling. This movie is just moment to moment slasher terror, and there's no deeper plot and meaning. It's just a horrific random occurrence that can honestly happen to anybody. I think overall, The Strangers, at least the first original one, is probably one of the best original slashers of the 21st century so far, with its all too possible scenario. So this gets 9 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10. Fresh. Fresh released in 2022 and is directed by Mimi Cave. This movie stars Daisy Edgar Jones, and she plays a girl who is having a rough time on dating apps but meets a charming fella at the supermarket played by Sebastian Stan. They hit it off immediately, but unfortunately it's revealed that he's a cannibal. Yeah. This was a very solid, fun movie that is elevated by its two leads. The movie starts off as kind of a rom-com, and you can tell there's a genuine chemistry between the two leads, even when the film takes its dark, flesh-eating turn. Overall, I really enjoyed Flesh. It has two charismatic leads, and it comments on modern dating in a hard-hitting way, where the person could appear to be a sweetheart, but then you end up in the basement hoping that person doesn't sell your organs. So this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10. Bones and All. Bones and All, released in 2022 and is directed by Luca Guadagnino. It stars Timothy Chalamet and Taylor Russell as two cannibals in love and on the run. This was a very interesting depiction of cannibals, because in most media, cannibalism is a freak deviance that's chosen, while here it's in their DNA and you need to feed on people to live. If they don't eat, they die, which is so creepy. The scenes of these cannibals feeding is absolutely creepy and vile. Like they feast like no tomorrow. And the Mark Rylance character, who is so creepy in this movie, when he eats that old lady, it is so ugh. The central love story between the characters I was invested in, and these two actors definitely had some heat for each other. Overall, I quite enjoyed Bones and All. It's a skin-crawling cannibal road trip romance with disgusting memorable scenes and good performances from Timmy Chalamet and Taylor Russell, so this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
The Beyond.
The Beyond released in 1981 and is directed by Lucio Fulci. So this film is about a woman who inherits this abandoned Louisiana hotel, and we find out this hotel is one of the seven gates of hell, just casually. This movie is goofy as hell. However, this movie has amazing cinematography and special effects. The prologue that takes place in 1927 looks stunning with its sepia tone, and when the dude gets crucified, it's pretty nasty. And the kills in this movie are fantastic, especially for this being the early 80s. The makeup for some of these creatures was outstanding and gross. There's zombies, there's hell on earth, but the part that stands out to me the most is where the spiders eat this dude alive in the most disgusting way possible. It's awesome. Overall, the Beyond story is all over the place, but I think it is solid due to the way the movie looks and the gross out gore. So this gets 7 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
The Mortuary Collection.
The Mortuary Collection released in 2020 and is directed by Ryan Spindell. This is an anthology film where there are multiple stories being told by the head of the mortuary, played by Clancy Brown, to a woman who's interested in working there. My favorite story was the Jacob Elordi one. He plays this scummy frat boy who hooks up with a girl and lies about using protection, and it backfires on him in the most terrible way possible. It was funny and terrifying at the same time. Then we get the one where the guy is taking care of his catatonic wife, and that gets really dark. And then the last story is a cheeky take on babysitter slashers. And then it all ties back into the head of the mortuary and the woman. So overall, Mortuary Collection was an entertaining, solid horror anthology with cool original stories and a fun lead performance from Clancy Brown. So this gets 7 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
The Pope's Exorcist.
Pope Exorcist released in 2023 and is directed by Julius Avery. This movie gets straight to the point. This family has a boy who's possessed and he starts acting evil and it leads to a standoff. This movie was a fun guilty pleasure. And it's one of the many films that rip off The Exorcist, but it has fun doing so. It's fun how this movie is kind of paced like an action movie. Russell Crowe is actually badass in this movie. He always keeps it cool. He tells these jokes in a hilarious accent, and he's always on top of things. The demon is so mean in this movie. He knows the weaknesses of each character, and he intentionally tries to hurt you mentally and physically. It's kind of funny to be honest. Overall, The Pope's Exorcist is a fun guilty pleasure with Russell Crowe being a badass father who exorcises demons. So this gets 7 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Lake Mungo.
Lake Mungo released in 2008 and is directed by Joel Anderson. It is an Australian found footage mockumentary film where it's presented as a paranormal true crime documentary about the death of a woman named Alice and her family going through grief while they also feel like they're being haunted by her. The film looks and sounds like a mid 2000s lo fi cable paranormal documentary. Everything from the interviews, the cameras, the cell phones they use to capture video. I love the low quality of it all. Even with likely budget constraints, the filmmakers did an incredible job of capturing a specific feeling. I respected this movie more than I loved it. This movie goes in some unexpected directions for better and for worse, and it's more of an exploration of grief and trauma than a traditional horror movie. Overall, Lake Mungo is definitely a respectable, solid movie that is incredible in recreating a specific look and atmosphere. I just didn't quite love it as some horror fans, so this gets 7 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Inside.
Inside is a French slasher released in 2007, directed by Julien Maury and Alexandre Bustillo. It's about a pregnant widow who on Christmas Eve is close to giving birth. but a mysterious woman invades her home and wants to kill her. This is a very hard-edged slasher that will shock you. The actress of the killer, Alison Paredes, was phenomenal. She was so evil and nasty, but man, the way she sneaks around and viciously attacks, it's horrifying. The main actress, Beatrice Dalle, is also great. You really buy the hell she's going through. Whenever she gets slashed and attacked, you just wince and cringe. You're like, ugh. Overall, I cannot recommend Inside to everyone. To the horror sickos out there like me, this was a straightforward home invasion slasher operating at the most extreme level with gory kills and a horrifying ending. This gets a 10 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10 to be honest.
Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead released in 2004 and is directed by Edgar Wright. Shaun and his best mate, Ed, are down on their luck early 30-somethings who have to survive the zombie apocalypse. This movie is awesome. And I think the thing that makes this movie so effective is that it's a good zombie flick that just so happens to be funny and emotional as well. The cast of this movie being so funny, likable, and relatable makes me get that much more invested in this movie. Especially Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, they're the two stars of this show. This film is so well directed and edited with its quick zooms and cuts, the comedic setup and timing of all the best gags in the movies. And by the end, it becomes a tragic horror film with all these characters reaching their emotional breaking points. I love Shaun of the Dead. It's probably still my favorite Edgar Wright movie because it is such a great mix of comedy and zombies. So this gets 10 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Tucker and Dale vs. Evil released in 2010 and is directed by Eli Craig. The whole basis of this movie is essentially the campers think Tucker and Dale are these ruthless, nasty killers due to severe miscommunication and these goofy accidents leading to some of the most funniest scenes I've ever seen in a horror comedy. I don't want to talk too much about specific scenes because you just kind of have to see it for themselves, but the way this movie plays out and how much of a mess Tucker and Dale get in is so funny and hilarious, and it's just full of these goofy ass accidents that are so funny. Overall, Tucker and Dale is actually pretty hilarious, and it's short and harmless, and it's actually full of genuine characters and some heart, with some of the funniest gags I've seen in a horror comedy. So this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Let the Right One In.
Let the Right One In is a Swedish horror romance released in 2008, directed by Thomas Alfredson. It is about a lonely 12-year-old boy who falls in love with his neighbor, who just so happens to be a vampire. I dug this movie. It's an unadulterated romance about young teens, which we don't get a lot of. The actress of Eli, the vampire girl, Ellie Eli, okay, I don't know. She can turn on her vicious blood-sucking side in a moment and commits to those crazy violent scenes like nothing. I like the visuals of this snowy winter hellscape where people can just disappear, and the love between these two characters gets pretty intense. Overall, I enjoyed Let the Right One In, so I'll give it 7 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Scanners.
Scanners.
Scanners, released in 1981, and is directed by David Cronenberg. This movie is about secret government organizations and psychics who are called scanners capable of telepathy and telekinesis. I didn't love this movie. It's a bit all over the place. This is the type of film that's built on its set pieces, and they are gnarly. The exploding head in the beginning of the movie is still an amazing achievement of practical makeup and visual effects. Just the visualization of psychic powers and how they can use them to kill or absorb information is so cool, and at times really gross and grotesque. The final telepathic standoff between the main guy and the villain played by Michael Ironside is wild because both of their bodies start to break down in the grossest way possible. Scanners is definitely a cool movie with its grotesque displays of psychic powers and body horror. The main story is just so all over the place, so I give this 7 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
The Green Inferno.
The Green Inferno released in 2013 and is directed by Eli Roth. Some college activists go into the Amazon to protest deforestation and their helicopter crashes and they get caught by a cannibalistic tribe. This was a sick gore fest. There are some sick scenes of dismemberment and cannibalism that are so gross and over the top. The characters and the acting are pretty subpar, but you're not here for that. You're here to see some college somethings get ripped apart and eaten, and that's what you get. This is a very low budget movie, and all that money they had for this movie definitely went towards the violence. And you know what? It was actually pretty impressive what they were able to achieve with that. Green Inferno isn't exactly high quality, but the gore is pretty crazy and legit. Even though this movie is pretty over the top and a little too much for probably most people. So this gets 6 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Alone in the Dark.
Alone in the Dark released in 1982 and is directed by Jack Shoulder. So mental patients escape and they terrorize this psychiatrist and his family. This movie is silly, but I will say the climax of this movie goes for it. When we get to the end of this movie, it becomes a pretty solid home invasion thriller where these mental patients are trying to kill this family. And it's a pretty gnarly standoff between the family and these mental patients that really goes for it and it gets really bloody. And that's what I feel like it saved the movie from being like, the two main villains of this movie, played by Jack Palance and Martin Landau, give it their all as these sinister, mentally ill people who act out of their impulsive rage and emotion. Alone in the Dark is a silly genre ripoff that's pretty fun with its overqualified stars. The movie, strangely, is very hard to find, but if you feel adventurous, give it a go because this 6 jack-o'-lanterns.
The Boogans.
The Boogans.
Boogans, released in 1981 and is directed by James L. Conway. This movie is about some miners up in the Rockies in Colorado trying to dig in this cave and they let out some monsters. This movie sucked. You have to wait like 50 minutes until the first real kill of this movie, and the movie is 90 minutes. So I'm just like, we don't see the monster itself until the movie's almost over, and it looks so goofy. But you know what? It kind of works, and when the kills do start to happen, it's actually up to par with its direct competitors. And with that low of a budget, I get why the monster couldn't be shown so much. It's just so goofy. Like, overall, the Boogan sucks, but it has its charm as a trashy 80s monster flick. It's just unfortunate that most of the movie is a boring slice of life nonsense. So this gets 5 jack-o'-lanterns.
The Burning.
The Burning.
The Burning released in 1981 and is directed by Tony Maylam. This is a blatant ripoff of Friday the 13th, which is also a ripoff. So one year, a group of kids accidentally burned a camp caretaker, and now he's back killing kids at this nearby camp. This movie is trash, but at times it's fun to watch. There are some quality kills in this movie, with the Rat Massacre definitely being the standout. This movie ain't an all-timer, but that was legitimately a great scene. Propsy, the main killer of the movie, he jumps out and just massacre all these kids. It was great. I will say this is definitely a comfortable summer camp horror flick. That's arguably more than most Friday the 13th movie because it actually just has kids being kids doing summer camp activities. So it was a nice summer getaway feeling. Overall, the running is just horned up summer camp teens getting killed, but it's kind of fun. So this gets 6 jack-o'-lanterns.
Jacob's Ladder.
Jacob's Ladder released in 1990 and is directed by Adrian Lyne. It stars Tim Robbins as a Vietnam vet who is suffering from PTSD. This was definitely one hell of a nightmare that goes into the depths of Jacob's broken psyche. He's haunted by Vietnam and losing his son, who's played by Macaulay Culkin. There is a whole deeper spoiler rabbit hole as to why these visions are happening and their significance. Unfortunately, the title of this movie isn't a reference to the Huey Lewis and the News song Step by Step. The imagery of these visions range from horrifying to gross in the best way possible. Overall, Jacob's Ladder is really good. It has an amazing lead performance from Tim Robbins, a broken man with a depth of trauma. And we get this surreal psychological horror film with some horrifying imagery. So this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
The Visit.
The Visit released in 2015 and it is directed by M. Night Shyamalan. The film uses the found footage format in a fun way. These two kids are very enthusiastic about film and want to record their visit to their grandparents, but they quickly see that something is off between their sweet grandpa and grandma. Think of this as a contemporary Hansel and Gretel reimagining. And then we get this grandma who is so crazy and kooky. She's able to be sweet and welcoming. And then the next moment, she's just unhinged, crazy, and wacko. I love it. The movie also has a sick sense of humor, with some moments that are horrifying but kind of hilarious at the same time. The kid actors are pretty convincing and they do a good job of making you care about them. Shyamalan is known for his twists, and the one in this movie was actually effective and enhances the movie by the end. Overall, I really enjoyed The Visit. It's a fun found footage flick with kooky ass old people, so this gets a Jack Williams out of 10.
When Evil Lurks.
When Evil Lurks released in 2023 and is a horror film from Argentina directed by Damian Rugna. A grotesque possessed person is cursing the farmlands, so these two brothers try getting rid of it, but it makes things so much worse, and terrible things start happening to them. This movie is very dark and it goes for it. The two brothers, when they try getting their families and the main city, that is when shit starts hitting the fan. And honestly, this was probably one of the most refreshing uses of demonic possessions. In this movie, it's depicted as this viral epidemic that makes people do the worst things imaginable. Just the look on the eyes of possessed people and what they do in this movie is pretty crazy, and some scenes actually shocked me. The ending of this movie really goes for it, and you're just left pretty defeated by the end from all the dark things that just happened. All right, Argentina, you win the World Cup and you make a great horror movie. When Evil Lurks was absolutely demented in the best way possible and will make you feel rotten by the end. So this gets 9 Jack Lanterns out of 10.
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving released in 2023 and is directed by Eli Roth. So this film revolves around the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts, where a year before, a terrible Black Friday riot happens and a killer emerges a year later, killing people who were involved in the riot. The Black Friday riot scene is both hilarious and horrifying because stuff like this has happened before, but the movie does it in the most over the top way possible with absolute mayhem and gore. The killer in this movie is dressed as a pilgrim in a John Carver mask, which is just, I love it. But make no mistake, the kills in this movie are mean and vicious. And the third act of this movie is pure bloodshed, perverting the holiday of Thanksgiving in the sickest way possible. I had way too much fun watching Thanksgiving. It's a sick, twisted, fun romp with some gross kills and perversion of Thanksgiving. So this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Bodies, bodies, bodies.
Bodies, 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 released in 2022 and is directed by Helena Rain. This film is about a friend group of young, rich 20-somethings who gather to have a hurricane party and play what seems to be a harmless murder mystery that goes very wrong. First off, this movie has an excellent cast of energetic and charismatic actors. Think of it as a trashy murder whodunit that's about some rich degenerates. This explores the reliance of social media and the paranoia and stress that comes from it. Also, this film is darkly hilarious, especially Rachel Sennett, who is so funny and energetic. When people start dying, the stuff that comes out of these characters' mouths feels like some of the meanest, resentful things a friend group can say to each other. Overall, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is a fun, darkly comedic whodunit with a great, energetic cast, exploration of modern themes, and a twist and turn, so this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Jennifer's Body.
Jennifer's Body, released in 2009, directed by Karen Kusama. This movie stars Megan Fox as Jennifer. So Jennifer gets possessed by a demon and starts eating people. I enjoyed this movie for what it was. It has some witty dialogue and some solid scenes of evil demon Megan Fox. Megan Fox absolutely owns this movie. She's able to be this magnetic force of nature who owns everyone on screen. She's sarcastic, funny, sexy, and confident. She goes for it when she has to act like a demon, whether she's throwing up black vomit or devouring her victims. Amanda Seyfried plays this wide-eyed, naive girl really well, and her chemistry with Megan is electric. This movie didn't do well critically and financially, but it has gotten a critical reappraisal, which is awesome. Overall, I really enjoyed Jennifer's Body, and I liked seeing this late 2000s time capsule of young Megan Fox in this weird horror comedy where she gets possessed by a demon and she makes out with Amanda Seyfried. So this gets 7 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
No one will save you.
No One Will Save You released in 2023 and is directed by Brian Duffield. This is about a woman who has to survive on her own during an alien invasion. But I'm not even kidding when I say there's barely any spoken dialogue in this movie. It is in the point of view of the main heroine, played by Caitlin Dever, who sells every single scene she's in without even saying a word in this movie. This movie is pure visual storytelling as we see everything we need to know about Bryn and her struggles and what happens in her past as the movie goes on. The moment to moment action of her evading and outsmarting the aliens kept me on the edge of my seat. Overall, No One Will Save You is a great recent horror flick with an exciting take on an alien invasion story told through action and pure visual storytelling that I highly recommend to everyone to experience. 9 out of 10 Jack O'Lantern.
Possessor Uncut.
Possessor Uncut released in 2020 and is directed by Brandon Cronenberg. Yes, David Cronenberg's son. This is a world where people can mentally take over someone's mind and use it for assassination. The main protagonist takes over someone, and lines start to blur over who's in control of who. I really dug this movie. Everything in this movie just feels grotesque and makes you feel dirty watching it. We see this woman intrusively live the life of this person, and it's shown how detached she continues to become in her normal life, where she feels less and less emotion. The mental conflict between the assassin and the person she controls goes to dark places, and we get these crazy ass images of these mental battles. There's some sick twists and turns that I won't spoil that you have to experience for yourself. Overall, I really enjoyed this. This was a unique contemporary sci-fi horror flick where mental boundaries and standards get crossed. So this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Happy Death Day.
Happy Death Day, released in 2017 and is directed by Christopher Landon. It is about a college sorority girl named Tree who, on her birthday, is reliving the same day over and over again. That results in her getting killed by a mysterious figure. And of course, I can report that this movie is a lot of fun. The actress of Tree, played by Jessica Roth, gives a committed final girl performance where she dies over and over again, ranging from comedic to horrifying. There is also a neat arc of her character where she starts as a pretty shallow sorority girl with lots of issues, but as she keeps reliving the same day over and over again, she bonds with this guy she met the night before, and then they're able to help each other out throughout all this movie. I love seeing how many variations of the same day she goes through that ends in her death over and over again. Overall, Happy Death Day is a very fun time loop slasher that's funny and full of twists and turns and has a solid committed performance from the lead actress, so this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns.
The Lighthouse.
The Lighthouse released in 2019 and is directed by Robert Eggers. It stars Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe as two lighthouse caretakers who absolutely lose their minds looking after a lighthouse where weird things are just happening. Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe give amazing performances here. They are acting out of their minds, and these two characters go through every single cycle of a partnership. There's scenes of them where they're just talking and bonding, but then it abruptly goes to them being piss drunk or they're trying to kill each other. And it's just incredible displays of pure acting. I don't know what the hell happened in this movie, but it was so well made. It's 4:3 aspect ratio and it's beautiful black and white cinematography. The movie was so beautiful to look at. It was both weird and hilarious and beautiful, and I quite enjoyed The Lighthouse, so this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
The House That Jack Built.
House That Jack Built released in 2018 and is directed by Lars von Trier. The titular character Jack is a serial killer, and we see him kill people through the years, and we go deep into his psyche. Matt Dillon plays Jack, and he is honestly great. He's an antisocial, sociopathic serial killer with legitimate OCD. When it's a mundane slice of life film where Jack is just killing people, going around all over the mountains, and he's trying to justify himself, and that's the movie I like, and it really had a dark sense of humor as well. But then the movie just gets really, really, really drawn out and repetitive and pretentious as all hell. And then the movie just gets surreal with all these crazy images. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Overall, the house that Jack built does a great Matt Dillon performance and some great scenes of depravity and dark humor. But it's just insanely indulgent. So I give this 6 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
La Llorona.
La Llorona released in 2019 and is a film from Guatemala directed by Jairo Bustamante. An elderly former dictator believes he's being haunted while he and his family are grappling over his past horrific actions. This movie was a slow burn, but the more you find out about this dictator and his past and the way it's affected his family, you see how complex this movie is. We see this new maid that comes and she is of the indigenous Maya people, so there is a conflict where she has to work there knowing what the man did to her people. We see the dictator's family deal with generational trauma and guilt, grappling with the fact that they're related to a monster. And then we see the deterioration of this former dictator and him getting haunted by the ghost of his past. No spoilers, but by the end, everything clicks, and I've liked it more than I thought about it. La Llorona was a solid film with its explorations of the complicated history of Guatemala, so this gets 8 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10.
Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead released in 1978, directed by George A. Romero. Dawn of the Dead is easily the biggest and most ambitious of Romero's original three zombie movies. Its epic scale and ambition is both its biggest strength and weakness. I feel like this movie starts a bit rough, and the plot doesn't start to get good until the main characters are together in the mall. But I'm a sucker for zombies in a mall. I've come to appreciate this film more on my latest rewatch because of the themes being explored. Once the mall is claimed by the main characters, you see how much they relish in having such a grand location to themselves. You see how possessive and territorial they get, and they become zombies of consumerism. And the fact that there's so much grand scale for a movie with such a low budget just shows the talent of Romero and everyone else involved. Overall, Dawn of the Dead is great, and its themes are still applicable to today, so this gets 9 jack-o'-lanterns out of 10. Oh my god. 31 movies in 31 minutes. I don't know how I did this. I don't know if I can do it next year, to be honest. We'll be back next year, but we'll see how that goes. Overall, thank you so much for watching. Happy Halloween. I hope you guys enjoy this and enjoy those horror movies and be safe. And yeah,